We were taught to believe that reality is something solid, fixed, and external, a universe already completed, moving according to laws that exist independently of us. We were taught that consciousness is something that happens later, an accidental byproduct of matter, confined to the brain and irrelevant to the structure of the cosmos itself. But the deeper physics looks, and the deeper awareness turns inward, the more this story begins to fracture. At the most fundamental level, reality stops behaving like a machine made of parts and starts behaving like an open question, unfinished, responsive, and strangely intimate. Quantum physics reveals a universe where certainty does not exist in the way we imagined. Particles are not tiny objects traveling through space like billiard balls. They are probability waves, mathematical descriptions of what could happen, not what is happening. Before observation, there is no definite position, no fixed momentum, no single outcome. There is only potential. Reality, at its core, is not a thing. It is a field of possibilities waiting to be expressed. This alone would be unsettling. But quantum physics goes further. The act of observation changes what is observed. Measurement is not passive. When we look, reality responds. A wave of possibilities collapses into a single outcome. Not because it was always there, but because interaction occurred. The observer cannot be removed from the equation, and with that the old idea of a detached universe existing fully formed without relationship quietly dissolves. Spiritual traditions have been pointing toward this same truth for thousands of years, though in a very different language. They speak not of particles and equations, but of awareness, presence, and the illusion of separation. They suggest that the world we experience arises through perception, that the self is not confined to the body, and that consciousness is not inside reality. Reality appears inside consciousness. What is striking is not that science confirms spirituality, but that both arrive at the same destabilizing insight. Separation is not fundamental. When you sit in stillness and observe your own experience, something becomes clear very quickly. Thoughts appear, change, and disappear. Emotions rise and fall. Sensations move through the body, yet something remains unchanged throughout all of it. Awareness itself does not come and go. It does not age, it does not react. It simply knows. This observing presence is so constant that it is usually overlooked. Not because it is hidden, but because it is always there. Quantum physics suggests something equally radical about the universe itself. Even what we call empty space is not empty. The quantum vacuum is alive with fluctuations, particles appearing and disappearing, energy emerging from nothing and returning to nothing. Creation is not an event that happened once in the past. It is happening now, continuously. Reality is not being succinct. It is being recreated moment by moment. If reality is continually emerging, then time itself becomes suspect. In classical physics, time moves forward in a straight line. In quantum physics, time behaves strangely. Effects can precede causes. Futures can influence past probabilities. Events exist in superposition, and in deep states of meditation, time collapses altogether. Minutes vanish. The sense of sequence dissolves into a single, expansive now. This suggests that time may not be fundamental, but perceptual, something consciousness uses to organize experience. From this perspective, presence is no longer a psychological technique. It is an alignment with the deepest structure of reality. When awareness rests fully in the present moment, it rests where reality itself is most alive, not as memory, not as anticipation, but as pure emergence. This is why stillness feels expansive. It is not empty. It is saturated with possibility. The ego, as described in spiritual language, is the structure that insists on separation. It says, I am here. The world is there. It builds identity from memory, fear, survival, and comparison. But quantum physics undermines this certainty. Particles that were once connected remain correlated across vast distances. What happens here influences what happens there. Separation, once again, reveals itself as a surface appearance, not a deep truth. When spirituality speaks of awakening, it is not talking about acquiring new beliefs. It is talking about a shift in perception so profound that the boundary between observer and observed collapses. You no longer feel like a fragment looking out at a vast universe. You feel like the universe looking at itself from a specific point, not metaphorically, experientially. Consider something simple. When you look at a tree, where does the tree end and perception begin? Without awareness, there is no color, no shape, no meaning. The tree exists as potential, but the experience of tree arises only through perception. This does not mean the world is imaginary. It means the world is relational. Reality exists through interaction, not isolation. Quantum physics reveals a universe that cannot be fully described without including the observer. Spirituality reveals a self that cannot be fully understood without dissolving the observer. These two movements seem opposite, but they meet in the same place. the recognition that reality and awareness arise together. Suffering often emerges from resisting this truth, from clinging to fixed identities in a fluid universe, from demanding certainty in a reality built on uncertainty. Spiritual traditions teach surrender, not as weakness, but as alignment. Quantum physics shows that uncertainty is not a flaw. It is the engine of creation itself. When you stop trying to force reality into predictable shapes, something changes. Life becomes less rigid, less threatening. Experience flows instead of fractures. This does not remove pain, but it transforms the relationship to pain. You stop seeing discomfort as failure and start seeing it as movement. From this perspective, consciousness is not something you possess. It is something you participate in. You are not awareness trapped inside a body. You are awareness expressing itself temporarily as a body. The universe is not outside of you. It is appearing within you, just as you are appearing within it. This realization does not lead to detachment from life. It leads to intimacy with it. Every moment becomes meaningful, not because it is special, but because it exists at all. Every breath is a collaboration between form and awareness. Every perception is a quiet miracle. Information, not matter, may be the fundamental currency of the universe. Quantum physics increasingly points in this direction. Information does not exist as an object. It exists as relationship, as pattern, as correlation. Spiritual traditions have long spoken of reality as vibration, frequency, resonance, different words pointing toward the same intuition that what appears solid is actually movement. Identity becomes lighter when seen through this lens. You still function as an individual, but you no longer feel isolated. You recognize yourself as a temporary expression of something far larger. Something that existed before you and will continue after you dissolve. Death, then, loses some of its terror, not because the body will not end, but because what you truly are was never confined to form. Just as a wave rises and falls without leaving the ocean, experience arises and dissolves without leaving awareness. This does not need to be believed. It can be felt in moments of deep stillness, when thought pauses and the tension rests. There is a quiet sense of continuity beneath change, a knowing without words. The meeting point between quantum physics and spirituality is not an ideology. It is an invitation to live with less certainty and more sensitivity, less control and more attention, less fear of not knowing and more openness to mystery. You are not here to solve the universe. You are here to experience it. To observe Italiano, to participate in it, and in doing so, to realize that the observer you thought you were searching for has always been the space in which the search itself appears. In the end, the deepest truth may not be something you learn, but something you remember. That, before thought, before identity, before time, there is awareness, silent, open, infinite, and that this awareness is not separate from the fabric of reality. It is the place where reality becomes real. And perhaps that is the quiet truth. Both science and spirituality are circling around from different directions. The universe is not something happening to you. It is something happening as you. What makes this realization difficult is not its complexity, but its simplicity. The mind is trained to search for answers through accumulation, more knowledge, more explanations, more certainty. Yet both quantum physics and deep spirituality move in the opposite direction. They do not add layers, they remove them. They reveal that what we are looking for was never hidden, only overlooked by the habit of seeking elsewhere. When attention turns toward awareness itself, rather than the objects of awareness, something subtle but irreversible begins to happen. Thoughts lose their absolute authority. Emotions continue to arise, but they no longer define the entire field of experience. Identity softens. You begin to sense that you are not moving through life as a separate entity. Life is moving through you as a process. In quantum theory, fields are more fundamental than particles. Particles are excitations of fields, temporary expressions of something deeper and continuous. In the same way, the personal self may be an excitation of consciousness, a temporary pattern arising within something far more vast and stable. The form changes, but the field remains. This changes how struggle is understood. Difficulty is no longer seen as an interruption of life, but as a modulation within it. Pressure does not mean something is wrong. In many cases, pressure is evidence that transformation is occurring. Just as particles behave differently under observation, consciousness reorganizes itself under attention. The quantum vacuum teaches a powerful lesson. Even in apparent emptiness, activity never stops. Creation and annihilation happen continuously. What looks like nothingness is actually fullness beyond comprehension. Spiritual traditions describe this same paradox. The void that is not empty, the silence that contains all sound, the stillness from which all movement emerges. From this perspective, creation is not something that happened at the beginning of time. Creation is now. Reality is not unfolding toward a final state. It is improvising itself, moment by moment, guided not by rigid determinism, but by probability and relationship. Existence is not following a script, it is responding. This has profound implications for how you live. If reality is responsive rather than fixed, then presence matters more than prediction. Awareness matters more than control. You do not shape life by forcing outcomes, but by aligning attention with what is actually happening. This is why surrender appears in both spiritual teachings and in the language of modern physics. Not surrender as resignation, but surrender as cooperation. When resistance softens, energy flows differently. When attention opens, perception deepens. Life begins to feel less like something happening against you and more like something happening through you. Quantum entanglement reveals that once two systems interact, they remain correlated regardless of distance. Separation becomes superficial. Spiritually, this points to an unsettling possibility. Nothing you experience is entirely private. Experience ripples through the same underlying field. Every thought, every action, every moment of awareness participates in a larger pattern. This is not a moral claim. It is a structural one. Compassion, then, is not an imposed virtue. It is recognition. To harm another is to disturb the same field you arise from. To act with care is to act in coherence with the deeper structure of reality. As this understanding deepens, identity becomes less rigid. You still operate as a person, but you are no longer confined by that role. You can participate fully in life without being consumed by it. Engagement replaces attachment. Presence replaces anxiety. Fear does not disappear, but it loses its authority. It becomes information rather than command, a signal to pay attention, not a reason to contract. In quantum terms, fear collapses possibility prematurely. Awareness allows possibility to remain open longer. The more this is seen, the quieter life becomes internally, even if nothing changes externally. Noise loses its grip. Urgency softens. You begin to trust timing without fully understanding it. You stop demanding certainty from a universe built on uncertainty. Death, when viewed through this lens, is no longer an absolute ending. It is a transition of form. Just as a particle is an excitation of a field, a life may be an excitation of awareness. The excitation ends. The field does not. This does not remove grief. It reframes Italiano. Loss still hurts, but it no longer feels like annihilation. It feels like transformation beyond perception. Something changes state. Something returns to depth. The meeting of quantum physics and spirituality does not provide comfort in the traditional sense. It provides honesty. It reveals that reality is not stable in the way the mind wants it to be, but it is far more alive than we imagined. You begin to understand that certainty was never safety, control was never peace, stability was never guaranteed, and yet existence continues. Awareness remains, life unfolds. This is the paradox at the heart of both science and spirituality. The more you let go of the need to secure reality, the more deeply you feel held by it. Not by promises, but by participation. You are not here to arrive at a final conclusion. You are here to remain open inside an unfolding process, to meet reality as it emerges rather than demand that it conform. And perhaps this is the most radical insight of all. You are not a fragment of the universe trying to understand the whole. You are the whole, exploring itself through a fragment. The observer you thought you were searching for was never hidden. It has always been the silent space in which searching happens. The awareness reading these words, the presence, hearing this moment. When this is seen, even briefly, something relaxes at the core of being. Life does not become easier, but it becomes clearer. Uncertainty remains, but fear loosens. Mystery deepens, but resistance fades. Reality does not need to be solved. It needs to be met, moment by moment, as awareness